It's Friday, and oh, what a Friday it is. Donald J. Trump indicted in Manhattan on Thursday, becoming the first American president, current or former, to be charged with a crime. This is Stand Up. I'm Pete Dominic. Stand Up. Hello, my friends, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, and what a day it is. Can you believe it? I have two great guests joining me today, both of which I spoke to before this news, but I had awesome conversations with both Christian Finnegan, as I do on Fridays, and the great Sam Seder of The Majority Report, probably my favorite commentator in all of media. Love me some Sam Seder. I know you're going to love both these conversations, and I'm ready to bring them to you hot and fresh here on a Friday. But first, I've got to just simply tell you one reaction. I'll just give you one reaction because I don't have a lot of time. I want to get this episode up. It's on a Friday, and I usually don't do the news Friday because I had an amazing hangout last night with over 70. There were 73 people at our hangout last night for a really long time. I remember seeing that number stay the same. Like, no one was leaving. We had a really interesting, fun, thoughtful, important conversation hang last night. So sign up and be a subscriber and don't miss out on that. But first, just one reaction that I want to read for you that I saw that I thought was most important. And this came from now referred to as one of the exonerated five. Of course, one of the five then New York City teenagers who was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for the 1989 rape of a jogger in central New York. Yusuf Salaam issued a brief statement following Thursday's criminal indictment of former U.S. President Donald Trump, who, of course, called for bringing back the state's death penalty to execute him and the other defendants, and never apologized after they were cleared. Yusuf Salaam simply tweeted, "For those asking about my statement on the indictment of Donald Trump, who never said sorry for calling for my execution, here it is. Karma. Karma." That's what he said. Ladies and gentlemen, very excited to have you listening. Really can't do it, of course, without your support. And let's get to it. My first guest today is, like I said, one of my favorite commentators in all of political news, the world, and podcasts and YouTube. He's big on YouTube, and now his podcast has been for a long time. It's called Majority Report. He's former Air America, former Marc Maron co-conspirator, partner on many things. He's worked in television and comedy, and of course, hosts Majority Report with Sam Seder. Also voices Hugo, a recurring character on the animated comedy series Bob's Burgers. I can't say enough stuff about this guy. I love him. At Sam Seder on Twitter. Very, very excited whenever I get to talk to him. And he couldn't have been more generous with his time after we got done talking. Gave me some great advice. But let's get to it right now. My first guest on today's episode, the Friday show of Stand Up, is the legend, Sam Seder.
Oh, look at it. Look at it. The legend, Sam Seder, from his mansion. Thank you for joining me.
Yes, I'm here sharing it with two cats, both of whom still have not figured out the whole kitty litter dynamic yet. So,
oh, interesting. I want to dig deeper into that.
Little clue into my morning.
I have so much to talk with you about. I'm so happy to be talking to you. I watch you and listen to you and Emma and the team. I think you do the best show on the internet, on the planet. Oh. You know, I think you guys do a great job. You have great guests. It's really smart. But so there's a lot of issues I want to talk with you about. But the thing that I think is great about Sam Seder is he will pretty much debate anybody, anywhere, with, certain good faith, meaning that you're not going to cut up this interview and edit me saying something. I feel like that's if you have any restrictions, what are your restrictions? Because this is a really important question about people are afraid of you, is my feeling. So go ahead. What's the deal?
The only time I have ever said no to anything that involves arguing with someone about stuff is at one point we got a request to be on Gavin McInnes's show when he was doing his last gasp effort at a show or whatever. The one, maybe he has one now, I'm not sure. But when he was trying to reform him, he was in some reformation project, and he had actually offered us Crowder to debate against. And in that situation, I would go on with Gavin as the moderator. But outside that, I wasn't going to go on his show with him as the moderator, because if I'm going on the show, I'm going to argue with Gavin. I'm not going to allow him, I'm not going to be used, let's put it this way, to make him seem like he's in the middle, as opposed to me and the other person who's debating. You follow me? Like, I'm not going to allow myself to be used to allow him to change his profile and use, me or whatever value he sees in me to do that. I'm not going to do that. But I will go on and argue with people in that situation. If it was just he and I arguing, or if it was like me arguing with him and Crowder, I'm okay with that. But he's not going to moderate, because he's not moderate in my mind.
Would you go on with Tucker Carlson if he promised not to edit and be live?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, would I do it twice? I think that's unlikely, because if I go on with Tucker, he knows I'm going to use that opportunity to go at him. And I'm not going to talk about some other topic. I mean, I've been in situations, when I was on MSNBC, I'll go on with their former Republicans, but only to argue with them. Like, there was one time I went on one of the shows, and I sat down in the seat. I can't remember who was sitting next to me. And then popping up on the TV remotely was Bill Kristol. And we were a panel, not arguing with each other, but doing some funny segment. You remember those from CNN, right? Like, it's Tickly Tuesday, and we're going to tell, 3-minute joke. And I told them, never, ever do that to me again.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be on a panel with someone like that unless I have the opportunity to argue with them and go at them. But otherwise, I'm happy to go on with anybody.
Yeah, I was seated next. I was at the Aspen Ideas Festival. I don't want to brag. I guess I am 7 times. And one time I'm at a restaurant.
Only 7.
Only 7. And one time I'm at a restaurant, and they sat Bill Kristol down to my wife and I told my wife we have to go. And I got up. I didn't even wait for it. I just got up and left, because I couldn't. I could stomach being there and doing that event, but I couldn't sit next to him without. I couldn't enjoy myself.
Yeah.
It's a different story. All right. So I just wanted to say it had been Aspen. You will debate anybody, and you've put that out there, but they won't debate you. Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, Rogan, none of these people will have you on their show. You just went on one of the biggest YouTube shows and had almost a 2-hour debate. I thought it was fantastic, and everybody should go watch that entire show. The PBD, this dude, it's a fascinating debate. But what is the record? You will debate any of these people, but they're afraid of you. Is that right? I don't know if they're afraid of me. I think, they won't come on with you, and they won't come on with you.
I'm trying to be charitable here. For a long time, Dave Rubin would say stuff, or Tim Pool would say stuff, or Joe Rogan would say stuff, or Steven Crowder would say stuff, on and on. Ben Shapiro would say stuff, and I would say, look, I don't care about them as individuals, as people. I just don't care.
Right.
They have big platforms where they espouse stuff that is either, I think, full-on lies or misinterpretations or just bad politics. And they seem to be interested in, they always claim Prager. They always claim that they're looking for leftists to debate and question, and that it's always about, the battle of ideas. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll come on and defend ideas that are opposite yours. I will come on, and if you want to debate, I'll debate. If you just want to have a discussion about it, I'll have a discussion. I mean, it doesn't matter. And they won't do it. Tim Pool has said that I was blacklisted at one point, he said on air. part of it I think also came out of the whole IDW, Sam Harris and the Weinstein brothers, not the one that went to jail, the other ones who maybe should spend some time in the clink. Of course, I'm being facetious, sort of, not really. And but I think their biggest concern is that they know I don't care if I ever get back onto their show. And so that puts me into a position where that I won't back off at certain moments. And that's my guess. I mean, I don't think I'm some type of, Magneto figure, if that's the guy from the X-Men, right? He's the guy with the
metal. He can.
Yeah, I don't have any superpowers. I think, moderately smart. 90% of what I know is in the same way that you do, interviewing really smarter people than us.
The difference in you and I is you retain the vast majority of that knowledge, and I think I retain very little of it. And I'm not even being funny. Like, I think you are the best debater and one of the most intelligent and articulate people in media because you really do soak all of that in. You're being, I'm not going to say you're being modest. I believe you're being genuine, but go ahead. That's why you know all this, but you retain it and you're able to deliver it in the moment, no matter who you're talking to.
Well, I think I probably prioritize my life maybe differently because I honestly can't remember the name of my children.
Right.
And but whatever it is, I don't think that I have some type of special powers. I just think that in my experience, and I know this from like getting into it with the right wingers on the radio, and we take calls. I take calls almost every single day, unscreened. We never know who it is. The only time that we do any type of screening is if somebody says they want to debate me on Twitter, and I say, okay, call in, give me your area code, because we can see the area codes, and I will pull you out of the 25 people in line first. And usually it's them. Sometimes we get multiple area codes. And because I like to argue. And,
I love that. I miss that about live radio. I love to argue too. I'm not as good at it as you are, and partly because I get emotional. So this is a question for you, a personal-ish, and a question about just being a grown man. During this last appearance that you did on this show, there were 3 against 1, and there was one guy who was real dumb, and he laughed right at you, right in your face about one of your ideas about tax policy. He really laughed at you like you were a ridiculous clown of a person. And I got very triggered. When I was on Joe Rogan, it was a really bad appearance because Joe and I were pretty friendly for years. And I got worked up and I got pitchy and I got ornery and I didn't come off well. I don't know how you kind of maintain your composure in that situation where an idiot who's so far beneath you intellectually is laughing at your face and you didn't get angry. You totally maintained. I wonder if there's a choice that you make.
I mean, there's somewhat of a choice. Like, I'm going in to make sure, and I think generally it's pretty rare that I will lose my temper in that context. I was raised in a household that was a little bit tumultuous, and I do not. The more aggressive the situation is, it almost like. The more things slow down for me and I get more relaxed. Wasn't necessarily the best circumstance in which to adapt that trait, but it's a trait that serves me well now. The only time like I can ever remember getting really angry is there was one time I had that guy, Michael Tracy, on. Yeah. And I had actually had there was some debate. I think it had to do with, I think, Matt Taibbi saying that Russiagate was as bad as, the Iraq war lies. Right. And I had reached out to Matt and I said, this came up on the show. This is back when Matt and I were more friendly or just ending our friendship. And I had brought it up on the show because someone had IM'd me on the day before. And I've never told this story publicly, incidentally. But somebody had IM'd me. And so I talked about it. And then I felt bad. And I emailed Matt and I said, look, I want you to know. I texted him. I was like, dude, your thing came up. I didn't go too far into it, but I didn't want to criticize you without giving you the opportunity to talk about it because I have respect for him. And I said, come on my show and we can talk about this because I think that without a doubt, there was, sort of like hyping of the Russia thing that, some people took stuff at too much at face value. But I just don't think it's comparable to a lie that the entire country was bought into and ended up killing hundreds of thousands of people and really fundamentally altering the trajectory of that part of the world and our country. And
you're talking about Matt. You're talking about Matt Taibbi comparing Russiagate to the Iraq War, I think.
Yes, yeah, that's he said that the journalistic malpractice was, analogous to or comparable to. And I said, no, because there's, it's like a tort, like there's the thing you do that is wrong, but there's the damages. And that's what makes up an offense in that situation. And he sort of like freaked out on me. And because this was in the wake of him getting Me Too'd, which in my estimation was completely unfair to him, which is not to say that he didn't have misogynist writing at a time and this and that. And I think he would agree with that. But he was sort of, I think, still reeling from that. And then really took it personally that people said you're a stooge from Russia at certain points. And it's like, I mean, I get stuff every day. Right. That is, I wouldn't even repeat on air. And that's part of what you do when you're, a public intellectual, as it were. And I considered him certainly more of one than me. So I invited him on. He wouldn't come on. And I was mad. And then Michael Tracy started saying, like, why don't you have somebody on? You're too cowardly to invite anybody on. And I was like, fine, come on. And so he came on that day. And, this is all live. This is happening an hour before the show. And I asked him, just answer me this question. Did you think the original investigation into Trump was legitimate? It's a very straightforward question. I had asked Glenn Greenwald the same question. He said, yes, because how could you not investigate in that situation? And I swear to God, 12 minutes later, he still won't answer that question.
I heard that, and I watched.
I lost it. Because I'm like, I invited you on. I didn't have to invite you on. Right. Nobody gives a shit about you.
Right.
And I'm willing to have this conversation. And my audience certainly doesn't want this. Like, I'm getting IMs from my audience going, like, to hang up on him. And he won't even answer the basic question to start, like, get where our starting point is. And he's being so obtuse. And that's when I just basically said, you're a coward. Get the hell off there.
People should go watch that, too. I'm really disappointed to hear about that with Taibbi. Matt and I used to be really good friends. And talking about you in comparison with him, like, it would be the equivalent of you kind of going down some conspiracy road and like, wow, we lost Sam Seder. That's how I feel about Matt. And
that's how I felt.
He's a real sensitive guy, too. So I can see him getting upset.
He's a lot more sensitive, I think, than one would project from his writing.
Yeah.
And then, sadly, the next thing I heard from him was he DM'd me after I had made a joke about Glenn Greenwald doing a promo interview for Alex Jones before the documentary at the South by Southwest Film Festival. I just wrote at the top, like, end scene. And I get a DM from Matt, like a day or two later, like, hey, did you see that documentary? And I write back, no, I didn't. Like, I thought, like, oh, okay, he's reaching out to me. It's been a couple of years. I had given him an open invitation. I said, if you ever want to talk or anything like that. And I'm like, oh, he's reaching out to me. That's nice. And I go, no, I haven't seen it. But I mean, I can't believe that Glenn is doing this. And then he asked me another question. And I realized, like, wait, is this for something that you're writing about? And he just writes, yup, and then disappears. And I'm like, you motherfucker. I took that as if we were still friends, not that I was being interviewed for a piece he's writing. And that was it. I just said, fuck it, he's gone. Because you thought that was malpractice journalistically? No, I thought journalistically it was like exactly what you would do. But if I thought that he was coming at me as someone who was asking me that question, I would have been like, here are the ground rules. Because, I mean, journalists understand what, the way you come at people. Yeah. Part of what journalists do is that they presume that everybody knows the ground rules of journalism. Whenever you're approached by a reporter, people, I should tell you this right now, you can negotiate with that reporter. You can say, everything I say is off the record until what I say can be used on the record. But reporters will never tell you that up front. I have been doing this long enough that I'm savvy to know that. I have friends who are in political communications and this and that, and like, I know that. But when he DM'd me, I just thought he's doing this as like, hey, it's your old buddy. I'm just asking you a question because you have conversations with, your guests where you're like, hey, Bill, what's the deal with this all the time? This legislation? Do you think it's good? Where should I go to read about it or something like that? I thought it was one of those. And instead, it was him looking for a comment from me for a piece he's writing. And I took that as a personal offense. Journalistically, go to town. I want to ask you about a couple issues and your thoughts on them before I got to let you go, because I could talk to you forever about all of this stuff and more. You guys had a great I thought really important conversation, nuanced conversation about gun violence in America on the Majority Report this week, as everybody did. I think the points that you and Emma made were really good in terms of, what changes. I always like to remind people, and maybe you disagree, that activists across the country are doing great work to get state laws changed in places like New York, Connecticut, and Michigan. And so we should give them credit because things do change in certain places. But then, when it gets to Congress passing something, we can't get it done because of Republicans, much less the Supreme Court. What are your thoughts on the future of gun violence, the near future, the long-term future, if anything changes dramatically around that? And if not, why not? I mean, we've seen examples in New York State, at least, and I'm sure around the other places around the country, but I've noticed them as much as in New York. The Supreme Court is going to strike down more and more of these. I mean, more and more. But I think we're going to have, I think it's just a matter of time before we have open carry in New York City, because the Supreme Court's just going to slowly make that march. I mean, I think we'll make, narrow progress in certain areas. Maybe there's some way of I think the big thing, it seems to me, has to be like product liability. If we're going to see any change, it's going to come on the product liability front, because it seems to me you can argue that you're allowed to carry a weapon, but if the Supreme Court is not going to allow people to carry bazookas or grenades, then I think that there's an opportunity for product liability things. Like, you're selling something that is beyond the scope of, what that is just too dangerous to people. Right. I mean, I think I think there also could be some type of maybe there could be some regulation around ammunition. There could be whereas it's so that it becomes a liability and profitability question. You mean like insurance, like a pool, a car, or a trampoline? You have to if a school has a trampoline, they have to, my dad would never, he's an insurance salesman, would never insure anywhere that had a trampoline. If you have a pool in New York State, you have to have a fence around it. If you have a car, obviously everybody knows the regulation. You're talking about that kind of a liability. Yeah. Yeah. And usually, and the way that starts is, in New York with the pool, for instance, right? That fence came from some undoubtedly a neighbor kid walks in, drowns, it becomes a statute. But the liability of things like, do you know why we have rubber mats in the playgrounds in New York City? Every playground has a floor of rubber mats. It's because some kid fell from the thing, broke their wrists. A plaintiff's attorney sued the city.
I think it's the same reason we don't have monkey bars anymore. My daughter broke her arm day one of kindergarten off the monkey bars. We did not file a lawsuit, Sam, but I think that's why they don't have it like so many people do. And
it's possible. We have monkey bars at ours.
No, you don't.
Yeah, but
I don't
in New York City, I know for a fact that the rubber mats are there because there was a lawsuit.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they recovered, but part of the award was like, you got to put mats down here. You got too many kids getting injured. It could be, if you get rid of the liability, something like it's too easy for kids to accidentally get a gun and kill somebody by mistake. So you need to put thumbprint IDs on there. Will that radically cut down on gun violence? No. But it's also possible that maybe there's a lawsuit to the effect of too many people go buy a gun and then commit suicide.
Right.
And maybe there's a legal theory out there that there's a liability associated with this where, maybe we can't statutorily pass a waiting period, but how do you know you're not selling your product to, when you have a website, you got to put, are you 18? That's been deemed sufficient protection online, but is this sufficient protection to assess how the gun is going to be used? I mean, really, in my mind, obviously it's the terror that parents live in, that their kids are going to go to school and get shot, the terror that kids live in.
Yeah.
We're having kids who are in multiple now shootings, one in elementary school, and then they have another in college. But in terms of sheer numbers, 3/4 of the gun deaths in this country, 30,000 out of 40,000, somewhere like that, I haven't checked the most, are suicides. And the efficacy of suicide by gun versus any other way is so much higher. We could save, by just not having, by making guns a 3-week or 4-week waiting period, we could probably save thousands of lives a year just on that.
Yeah, great points, all of them. You just talked to Maron
Rappaport,
of Local Call. It's an Israeli media outlet.
Yeah, he writes in 972 magazine as well.
And I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on that. What's going on there? You've always been really outspoken and spent a lot of time on the Arab-Israeli conflict and what's going on. I'm told you're Jewish.
That is correct. Yes.
By the way, had this discussion with my daughters the other night. My daughters said something about, she's a Jew. And I'm like, can you say Jewish? And then she's like, oh, you're so politically correct. I'm like, nah, I mean, if you know someone well and they're your friend and we make all these jokes or whatever, like a lot of comedians and so on. But if you're talking about where are you on Jewish, Seder? Because
I have never been that sensitive to, if someone says you're a Jew, aren't you? I don't go excuse me. I think it's probably the tone, although I can see, I don't know. I guess, look, having been comedians and having all our friends comedians, our weather vane for this stuff is we've got to be it's got to be much more in the forefront of our minds to sort of I don't get sensitive about it. I don't but I probably be, but because it never occurred to me that was, it really depends on in the context in which someone says that word can go either way. If someone says you're a dirty Jew, I might take more offense to that than you're a very proud Jew.
Does it bother you? How about this one? And I want to ask you about Israel. Does it bother you that when I'll speak for myself. When I hear people say Jews run the media or Hollywood, I think of your face. Is that offensive?
I mean, only to the extent that I'm not getting the residuals that I thought would be coming with something like that.
Okay.
The amount of work I do to control the media and Hollywood, one would think that...
I'm just saying, every agent and manager and executive in male that's also Jewish looks exactly like you that I know. I'm just saying that. That's my own anecdotal experience.
Imagine what it feels like to walk around Brooklyn and just keep seeing people that look like you.
Wow, I see Sam Seder everywhere.
Over again. And it's just like, it's a nice feeling to feel like, you know what? If something happens to me, there's so many more to just like jump right in. But
the issue in Israel is we're not specifically talking right now about the Arab-Israeli conflict. We're talking about an internal Israeli conflict where there was like 13 weeks of protest and people across a broad range of ideologies stood up against what the far-right extremists were trying to do with what's being called a judicial coup. What are your thoughts on how significant this moment is, I guess, is my question.
It could be super, super significant. And it is somewhat related to Palestinians who are occupied and to Arab and Palestinian Israelis. There's a canary in the coal mine type of situation, right? Like the nativist, I would argue, fascistic, at least racist, fundamentalist, nationalist, all of those things that have been focused on Palestinians and not exclusively, like I know, like also, Ethiopian Jews who have come into Israel are subject to this, but on some level as well. But that was the sort of like the vanguard, the zeitgeist, and now the rest of the train has caught up. And these same fundamentalists combined with these sort of like right-wing, ultra-nationalist, fascistic, in my estimation, have coalesced in this government under Bibi Netanyahu. And they want to get rid of the judiciary, essentially. It'll still be there, but for all intents and purposes, it'll be like an administrative court. I mean, it won't be able to come up with anything. Will not be able to protect the rights of women, which is a problem within fundamentalism, gay people, obviously trans people, Arab people, Palestinians, anybody not of those two sections of Israel, which is increasingly becoming more of the majority of that country. And much of like the liberal, central, even center right people have pushed back. Like you say, the rallies over the last weekend, 500,000 people would be the equivalent of 18 million people taking to the streets. And more importantly, some of the elite military basically said, we're walking off. And for Israel, everybody serves in the military. The Air Force, the idea of like hundreds of Israeli pilots saying, we're not going to serve. Unprecedented.
Right.
Never happened. I mean, over the decades, you've had tens of people who've said that because of of bombing the Palestinians in Gaza or whatever it is. Hundreds were walking off. It just doesn't happen. Like you say, Bibi has like punted for a month. As far as I've read and the interviews I've done, there doesn't seem to be like, you're going to punt for a month, but you're going to come back and you're going to be in the exact same situation. Yeah. It's unclear which way that goes. One of the big things could happen is there's been a growing push to have a constitution in the country, and there has not been one. And if you have a constitution, that's grown over the past month. And if you have a constitution, and do I think the chances of them adopting a constitution are incredibly slim? Yes. But if you have a constitution and you edify the concept of equality, even if you limit it to just Jews, let's say in Israel, those concepts have a tendency to expand, right? Like we started our constitution, all men are created equal. We owned slaves at that time. Now, it took a long time But things speed up in the modern era. It's not inconceivable to me that if they do have a constitution that was to provide, equal rights for Jews, women, Jewish or Israeli citizens, it's hard not to it becomes quite clear that you're denying the humanity of the Palestinians that you're occupying.
Yeah.
And that's a lot less tenable. All that said, I think this is a very dramatic point for Israel. Much of my critique of Israel for both before I got into radio 20 years ago and just in general from really the time that I was like 14 or 15 in Israel, watching the helicopters go low to bomb Lebanon at one point, has been out of a deep connection that I grew up feeling for Israel because it's what I learned. Now I don't feel that connection. It's sad to me that I don't. I have real trepidation. I'm not convinced that this is a sustainable project. I worry. This is going to be a country that is going to be, in time, a pariah of a country, and they're going to have nukes. And I worry about that. I think we may have missed the opportunity for the U.S. to exert the authority that needs to. We should, and I hope we get there very quick, make our aid to them highly conditional. But I think the way things are going, I think that they'll find that aid somewhere else, maybe.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, never thought about that. All right. Sam Seder, so many other questions I want to ask you, but listen to The Daily Show and you'll learn more, as I always do. I so appreciate your time. Always love connecting with you. And
Pete, I'm a big fan of yours. As you know, we share a lot of audience members, some of whom are a little too aggressive on Twitter. We both know that. We know who I'm talking about. We don't need to bring them up. But they're going to enjoy the fact that we've just almost name checked them. But I'm a big fan of yours, and so glad this thing is working out, and so envious of the shiplap back there. I can't even tell you.
Yeah, it's Seder.
Seder.
Yeah, you could do it. I like your set. You seem to be figuring it out. 1.25 million YouTube subscribers. Did you get a lot more when you did that PBD show?
No.
It's like he's got.
No, I wasn't anticipating getting that many more. It's a big show, but it's also sort of like they do a lot of marketing, and also it's a lot of right wingers. And so I did get a lot of people on Twitter going, "You're an idiot," and misspelling "your."
Sam Seder, everybody, thank you very much.
All right, I cut him off there. Didn't get his recorded goodbye. What an amateur move. How did that happen? Go listen to the Majority Reports with Sam Seder and thank him on Twitter for joining me, because that would mean a lot. Love talking to him. So show some love or pop him an email. People have been doing that. Thank you very much. People have been emailing guests. They look up their emails if I don't include it in the show notes, but check out more in the show notes for Sam and all of my guests each and every day. Become a subscriber right now. And now it's time to get to my second guest. It is the great Christian Finnegan, who I talk to pretty much every Friday. And I'll be talking with Ophira Eisenberg, I think, today, and probably post that over the weekend or on Monday, most likely on Monday. And I'm really excited to get her back in here. But right now, it's time to get to Christian Finnegan, who is one of my all-time favorite comedians. You should go watch his specials. You should see him live. He's going to be in Boston at the end of May, he's just announced. And you should definitely subscribe to his newsletter, his Substack newsletter, New Music for Olds.substack.com. You can learn about and hear about, maybe for the first time, be reminded about music that you forgot. I love that newsletter. It's so much fun. I hope you subscribe and pay for it. It's also going to be his birthday this weekend, so pop him a birthday wish. And let's get started right now with the almost 50-year-old Christian Finnegan on Twitter at Christ Finnegan. Go say hello to him, wish him a happy birthday, and let's do it.
Finnegan, the 49-year-old Christian Finnegan. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad you got got me in here right under the wire before the sixth decade shall begin.
The sixth decade. I like the way you're looking at it there. And happy birthday to you. People will be listening to this. The man was born on April 1st. He's turning 50, and he's going to Iceland with his wife. And we are just so grateful for you to be a huge part of our community and this conversation with me. I am so grateful to you, and I so am celebrating you. And I just wanted to be very sincere about that. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Pete. I mean, you've been very, very effusive this week towards me, and I appreciate that. I don't necessarily, like on Twitter, you've been very kind and thoughtful, and I don't know how to accept that without sort of deflecting and turning it into a joke. So I just want to say I will not kiss you.
Okay. Well, those were DMs, but
okay, well,
I thought
you
that
gotta shoot your shot. I get it. as the kids say.
I will say this. I don't know that it was because of this, but I had a couple random people from my life reach out to me that I haven't talked to in a while and say really nice things, totally randomly. And it felt so good that I just
forward.
When given the opportunity, whenever given the opportunity, I'm really trying more to take it. So that's maybe something behind it. I don't know. It's
a good way to be. I mean, it's something I forget occasionally, how good it can feel sometimes to just be a sort of unexpected delight in someone's day.
Yeah. And I also think that after the shooting of children, I personally am pretty good at spreading a little bit of joy individually and privately or publicly like this. I'm good at it. And I like to do it. And so I think that was also going on this week for me and for others. You know, I've started sharing stuff, funny stories about Julia playing the cross on Facebook and stuff as a way to just, hey, I know you're scrolling. Here's a sweet, funny thing. Sure.
Yeah, it definitely and I wouldn't say that I've gone as far as you in terms of actually being a good person, but I am less awful, certainly, in the face of something just disgusting, like what people dealt with.
On a normal day, you'll be on a crosswalk and you'll mash a kid's face.
Yes.
But
no balloons go unpopped. Candy stolen uniformly. Yeah.
Do you like comedy when people who don't have kids, or even they do, and they just bash kids and just destroy them? Like I'm thinking of Bad Santa for some reason, but also, you know, a lot of people do that. Do you think that's fun? I think it's fun.
I think it is fun. I think it's fun when it's done well. And I mean, I think it's because it's one of those social taboos, you know, that when you see it broken in a funny, jarring way, there's something very satisfying about it. It's like, you know, when you see a kid treated like an adult, like a kid treated as poorly as adults get treated, there's something funny about it.
First person I ever saw, I feel like, do that is I'll never forget seeing Louis C.K. do a joke where he just called his daughter an asshole. And I'd not really seen someone go that hard against their own kid. Last night I watched a joke and shared it on the podcast.
I would say that special is kind of what made Louis C.K.
Is that right?
First, yeah, I mean, that special that you're talking about, I think, was the one that kind of elevated him from being a comic that comics liked to being, you know, a real comic force in his own. I mean, he talks about how, you know, he used to be very, I'm sorry to interrupt you, by the way.
No.
You know, he used to be very kind of surreal and kind of play with stand-up form and kind of, there was definitely a thick layer of irony to it. And I think that, you know, that was the special where he kind of started talking about real stuff and people reacted to it.
Yeah. Real stuff being, it's okay to complain about your kids. It doesn't mean you don't love them or love them any less than anybody. All they do is talk about how great their kids are, how much they love them. Lori Kilmartin, our friend, a very funny comedian, I shared a joke she had shared last night, social media, just about, she's always just been terrible about her son and to her son. I mean, the joke was I tried to give him away. I remember when he was so small, I tried to give him away. He fit on the church steps.
He said he was small enough to fit on a Catholic church doorstep, I think.
Yeah. And the priest was like, I like him young, but not that young. And those jokes I think are always really funny because you know Lori loves her son and that she's a great mom.
Oh, I don't know about that. No, I'm joking. Of course she does.
Okay. Well, I have a big question to open here with, and I'm in a weird situation. I need your advice specifically. Okay. You, of course, being the purveyor of new music for olds, I get so many great tips for music that helps me so much with like different moods, like paint a room to this song. And I'm thinking of changing from Spotify to, I guess it's Apple Music, not iTunes. And it's a very hard thing for people to do. Once they lock in, they get you, you're a subscriber. It's how I like to do with stand-up subscribers, of course. There's nothing else that even exists out there. Can I do it? Do people do it? Do people change? Can you change?
I think you can, Pete. And I honestly, I found it heartening. You're the third person this week that I've seen say they're going to make this change. I have always been an Apple Music person, and I'm not trying to act like, hey, my, artist swindling conglomerate is better than yours. None of it is. No,
we're not saying anything good about these companies. We're admitting that we use them, and I'm simply saying I might change from another because of functionality and convenience. They are horrible and they are destruction, and I should have said that, but.
Yeah, no, but for a long time, I always felt like I was somehow uncool because I used Apple or iTunes at the time. When everybody started, using Spotify, it reminded me of the way I felt when I was still using AOL and everyone had moved to Gmail. Like there was just something unspoken, even though really there shouldn't be a difference. Really, you're just getting your music from a different place. But a couple things. One, the music quality on Spotify is not as good. Just the sound on Apple is better. You'd only notice it if you were literally clicking back and forth, listening to the same song on each one, like back to back.
But you do that
on your
most
day-to-day
days.
Listening. You wouldn't.
I would imagine you spend a lot of time doing that.
Well, I've had to. I have Apple Music and Spotify and Amazon Music Unlimited just because I need them to write my newsletter. But there is a difference in sound quality if that is super important to you. Spotify, from what I gather, from what I've never been a big user other than when I have to. It's better in terms of like the playlists, the playlists that they generate, not the ones that you make yourself, but the sort of the ones that Spotify makes. Although Apple makes them, I don't know that they're any better or worse, but that's what people say. And Spotify does this goofy thing at the end of the year that people love, where they'll sort of send you, or you can sort of download like what they call Wrapped, your year Wrapped.
Yeah,
and people seem to love that.
They tell you what you listen to, and a lot of the stand-up listeners would send me like a screen grab, and that's
right.
That they listen to this show a lot of hours, which is nice.
For me, it was never an option. Like, all of my music was already from when I was, buying all of my music, and I still buy some things, but at this point I'm mostly just I'm borrowing my music from Apple like we all are.
Right.
But all of my music was already in iTunes. So why would I start a second thing? Like, I want it all in one place. So I think if you were of a certain age where you didn't own a lot of music, because I have stuff not just that I bought through iTunes, but all the CDs I burned from 20 years ago was already in my iTunes library. Right. So I never understood the idea of switching over to a completely different format. But
that's why I'm thinking of switching back, because I kind of like it all in one place. Although you've just made arguments that I do appreciate about Spotify. So, that's why it's hard. It's hard.
First of all, but the thing is that they're all catching up. Apple started doing the same thing with the year end. They're not as far along with it, but they will be. They all copy each other. They all copy what works. Nobody really has has cornered the market on anything music oriented. Anything that works, the other formats will just copy within a year or two.
Speaking of copying, what are your thoughts on how much have you paid attention to, learned about the chat bots, the chat GBTs, the AIs that are out there and available? Because I'm going to have conversations over the next few days off air. I've been reading and I've been listening to a lot about it, trying to learn before I say much about what I think, or I talk intelligently about it on tape. But so how much have you paid attention to it? How do you have concerns? Do you think it's a, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I feel I have the same sort of reticence where I don't want to talk too much out my ass.
All right. Well, just give me what you're, where you, what do you think it's at right now? And what you,
I mean, I think that there are the sort of AI true believers, and then there are the AI, I mean, for lack of a better word, Luddites, are the people who are, terrified and saying the sky is falling, and neither is accurate. Probably neither polarity is the way it's going to play out. But if I had to say which direction I lean further in, I probably lean further in the terror direction than in the excitement direction. Yeah. Granted, because of the life that I live and because of the things that are important to me, not just as a creator of creative content. First of all, I think this all started to get bad when artists started being called creatives. That was where the thing started to really turn.
Why? What's wrong with that?
Because it's tech's slow jealousy of artistic people and trying to eliminate what artistic people do and try to quantify it and try to make it like a department of a company as opposed to, oh, you're creative, like that. It's just some section of a business that I own. Do you know what I mean? Like as the tech guru own, I just creatives. I mean, to me, that's fine for copywriters. It's fine for, if you're a graphic designer who designs like corporate logos and things like that. But, William Shakespeare was not a creative. He was an artist, and I'm not trying to, I know that sounds ultra pretentious, but I do think that and I retweeted someone this week who said it very clearly that a lot of the sort of tech, the sort of full into AI people, that there is a genuine hatred and jealousy among the nerd class of people who are artists.
Yeah.
And they want to eliminate them in the same way, for the same reason that like Elon Musk wanted to sort of own Twitter, to sort of be the center of conversation. This has always sort of been the case, is there's always going to be a jealousy of who they perceive to be the cool kids. And, our nerd overlords, who are generally speaking a bunch of fucking lames, all of them. They're the people you'd least want to talk to at a party, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezoses, all of these people are not people you would speak to willingly if money and your career was not on the table.
Right.
And they don't understand art. They don't understand what makes a good script, what makes a good novel, what makes a good play. God forbid they, plays. Ugh. And so I think they try to, I think there is maybe not a conscious desire to eliminate it, but, if they can sort of dominate it by creating a robot who will do something that is 92% as good as art, then they want to do that. And what, of course, those people don't realize is that 8% is what makes art worthwhile, right? And what makes it good. You can have a short story that is 90% as good as something a human wrote. And, if you're not an artistically inclined person, it'll probably seem just as good. But it's that extra 10% that is what makes it memorable and what helps the culture and what people will remember 200 years down the road.
Is ChatGPT going to replace comedians writing their own material? Can I say to ChatGPT, my daughter in her lacrosse game yesterday, her opponent was complimenting her, and I want to write a whole joke about that. Will it write the whole experience and take it in different directions that could be funny?
It'll replace copy. It won't replace writing.
You don't think
if that
so?
Makes sense.
I think a lot of people think that it will. Not specifically to the specific example I gave you necessarily, but just
I could see it sort of comedians starting to use it as a jumping off point, where like as sort of a chunk of raw material that they will then punch up. I could see a lot of artistic disciplines using ChatGPT in that way. It's like, all right, I want to write a short story. I want to write a novel or whatever about, a frog who, whatever, using the Michigan J Frog example, a frog who can only sing when nobody's looking or whatever.
Right.
And the computer will spit out something that is coherent and not without charm, but ultimately kind of, whatever, dead feeling, it'll feel a little antiseptic or whatever.
Right.
And then I, as the human, will go in and add my character to it. So I can see it replacing a lot of that artistic work, which, I do think that artists eventually, will find a way to use editing technology and make things more interesting than they would otherwise be. But in terms of like the people who are making the art, and I hate using the word art so much because it sounds ultra pretentious.
Okay.
But, I think it definitely spells a lot of misery for the people who are in the industry doing it the quote unquote old way right now.
We will see, but I really want to, if you have thoughts on that as you see it develop, I always want to hear them. Also, I saw you tweet this. I should have asked you before I hit record, but I feel like you might have a lot to say about this because it's to some extent from personal experience and your personal opinion. But you shared this piece by a guy named John Gans from his Substack, titled johngans.substack.com. I don't know who he is, I don't think, but his piece is The Jock/Creep Theory of Fascism. It's real and it works. And I haven't read it, but I have a sneaky suspicion. Well, I have a pretty good idea of what he means. And I feel like you've espoused this like years ago to a certain extent. Can you say anything about this?
Yeah, I mean, his piece is very well written, and it's. I mean, I've always had this idea, which I'm sure I've said on this podcast at some point, that we grew up in the '80s, and the battle was always portrayed in sort of '80s teen comedies as jocks versus nerds. Like that was always the Revenge of the Nerds, right, in every single movie that came out in the '80s. Whereas, in my opinion, that has never really been the battle. The battle has always been jocks versus the arts kids, whether they were in the school play or in, hung around in the art class or, were in the band. That it's always been jocks versus artsy kids, and that nerds have always been a swing group, and they could go either way.
That's it.
And
that's it.
Whichever direction nerds go kind of defines who has the momentum.
Parliament.
Yeah, exactly. Parliament, exactly. Perfect way of saying it. And as you saw in the sort of late aughts through 2016, when tech had sort of a general, slightly left reputation, that when big tech, when Elon Musk was still voting Democrat and all those things, that kind of helped the liberals. So, it kind of gave momentum to Obama and that side of the culture war. And then, as we've seen, as they've sort of been sucked into the right more, and this is obviously, I'm speaking in the broadest of brushes.
Yep.
But
they being the kind of the tech experts,
the Silicon Valley types, and I think a lot of that is because they started to acquire so much money and wealth and power that they were like, oh, wait, I can be the jock now. And they kind of can't. And I think that's what one of the things this piece talks about. And it uses fascism specifically in Italy and Germany as a way of showing this, that they talk about. And granted, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on either Nazi Germany or Mussolini's Italy, but basically talking about how Italian fascism was very jock oriented. It was very bully, like kind of the, push you around and call you queer or whatever, like that sort of attitude. And how Nazism was always kind of these like weird nerds, these kind of creeps, Hitler being the perfect example, but also, Himmler and Goebbels, like they were these sort of creepy Stephen Miller types. And, and they want to fashion themselves as being sort of swashbuckling, and of course the down the totem pole, the sort of rank and file German Nazis may have been just as jockish, and again, using his terms, not mine, as Mussolini's crew, but that at the top, it had a real weird nerd. And you see that now, that like the rank and file Trump supporters, the sort of the boaters and the people wearing the hats and the people showing up at the rallies are very much of the kind of like jock mentality. But a lot of the real right wing, racist theoreticians, the Michael Antons, the Nick Fuenteses of the world, a lot of the real racist creeps, they're weirdos, they're losers on some level, and that eventually those two groups will not be able to. They can't. They're strange bedfellows at the end of the day. They can only be in the same bed for so long before it goes one way or the other.
This piece, I love that. I think it's really interesting. And apparently a lot of people did, because this piece, a lot of people paid attention to it. And Ross Douthat of the New York Times is a conservative Catholic columnist who I used to work with at CNN. Is really weird. He tweeted about the article. The problem with mapping this onto American politics is that it's all jocks here. And Gans replied by saying, in the front of the house, yes, I talk about that at the end. I'm not sure what they're referring to, because I haven't read it yet, of course.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting pushback. Like, they're all jocks. And I think he means in DC or in politics.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He's talking about like Trump and DeSantis and the people. Although, DeSantis is kind of an underrated creep. You know what I mean? Like, as a person, yeah, he was in the military and sort of, acts like he's... Well,
he played baseball in college. Apparently that's how he got into Harvard. So he's definitely a jock background.
Yes, he certainly is. I mean, he's definitely of that jock mentality, but he's also kind of a strangely weird and unlikable dude on a personal level. I mean, although I would say that about Trump too, so who can say? But anyway, yeah, I recommend anyone. I subscribe to his Substack. He's a smart dude, John Gans, and so yeah, it's definitely worth posting and taking a look at.
All right, let's end on a poignant note about how you're doing, how you're feeling. Turning 50, going away to Iceland with your wife. You're always very.
We're not leaving till the 10th. So, but yes, we are going to Iceland, and looking forward to that for sure.
But that's like your birthday trip, present, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you're continuing to work out. You haven't been drinking for a long time. You seem to be making some pretty overt healthy choices fairly consistently. Not a problem if you take a step back or two.
I will say, for the record, and I don't want to belittle anyone's recovery or struggles that they're having, I have not accrued even one positive benefit from having quit drinking. Like, not even one. Like, I mean, I'm sure that there are positive benefits. I'm sure that if a doctor were to look at my insides, they'd be like, oh my God, your liver looks better and all those. I'm sure that's true. And I have no plans to go back to drinking or whatever. But all of the sort of things that people say gets better when they quit drinking, I have not experienced.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd love I bet you people listening can somehow relate to that, and I would encourage them to reach out if that's the truth, and I'll share it.
I mean, I would really love it to be true. And every time I've said that to someone, be like, oh, just wait. Like, I heard when I think I complained about it on Twitter after 3 weeks, and people are like, oh, well, wait till you get to 90 days. And then, oh, wait till you get to 6 months. Well, it's been 8 months now. And, and granted, it certainly hasn't stopped me from smoking more pot than I probably would have if I definitely have been like leaning on that a little more. Mm-hmm. And so probably if I really wanted to notice a real change in my life, I would quit that too. But a man has to have some joy. I don't think I can raw dog reality quite yet.
And how is the gym going? How's the exercise going?
It's functional. I mean, It's hard because
you said, what did you tweet? You said, if I could pay someone,
I'd pay double if they'd take all the mirrors down.
Really
like fun. It really, and I'm not even, I mean, it's a joke, obviously, but I'm serious that nothing deflates my desire. Like, nothing makes me want to just go home than, seeing my disgusting torso in the mirror. And part of it is just because I've seen what I look like when when I lost 90 pounds 15 years ago, and I was in good shape. I never had like a full six pack, but I had the top two for a little while. and I, looked good in clothing, and you know how like when you're at the gym and you're working out and you're vascular, your veins are kind of coming out, and you're like, oh my God, I look jacked right now.
Yeah.
I have to accept that I'm never going to have that feeling. I'm never going to look in my mirror and be like, yes. It's always going to be a diminished version of something I remember from my past. And that's, probably just the past, the circle of life, as it were.
Do you ever find yourself looking at other men's bodies and comparing yourself?
I don't have to compare. I'm easily the person in the worst shape in the entire gym on any given day. Like it's not even a question. Well, I mean, there are particularly, my gym is a bit meatheady.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a larger ripped to unripped ratio than at other gyms. I
actually was thinking when I asked that, because I find myself doing that sometimes. I was actually thinking about social media, because I don't go to a gym and I'm not, I'm in the shed a lot. But I think about, like, I see dudes our age on social media and wonder where I'm at.
Like that, am I in as good shape as that guy?
Or yes, or could I be if I did this or that, if I changed this or that, and would that be worth it? And do I need to be? But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could do that would be better. I mean, I had a muffin for breakfast. Nobody forced that down my throat. I did that to myself. I hear a chocolate muffin. I had a chocolate muffin for breakfast.
I hear so many men talking about intermittent fasting.
I tried it for a couple weeks, and I think that is probably what I would go back to, because it's the problem is that I think it works better for single dudes than for someone with a wife and or kids, because you're not, when you're married or whatever, you're not completely in control of your own schedule. I mean, unless you're a terrible spouse. And so it can be hard sometimes to be like, sorry, we're not allowed to eat because this is not my designated eating time.
And you like to eat with your partner?
I mean, when possible, certainly. Especially since my wife has become utterly obsessed with meal kits, the HelloFresh.
Oh yeah, we've done that. How long has she been doing it?
It's been about probably close to a year, or maybe 8 months, something like that. Yeah, and it's just it's something I get stressed out by a little bit when these big bags of food show up, because then it's like this pressure. It feels like the clock is ticking, and also it's like, because but no, wait,
just to be clear, that the clock is ticking to use the ingredients.
Yeah. And also it's just like, because I've never been a guy who cooks. It's like, I'm a dude who gets a sandwich at the deli. Like that's, to me, that's my lunch, and the fact that our schedules are a little off, because depending on whether I have sets, and she's at QED a lot. And so we have to kind of really be a little more strategic about it. And that can sometimes, it really makes me struggle with my desire to live like a 23-year-old for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I get it.
This whole responsibility and cooking meals.
Well,
thing.
I luckily, when we're not doing it now, but my wife did it for I was surprised that she did it, but she just thought it might be easier. Did it for maybe like a few deliveries or something, but there was never an expectation that I was going to be the one making the food. So I didn't have to feel really stressed out. I would look at it and be like, oh, someone's going to make that, and then I'll eat it.
Well, it's hard, because it's like, she's definitely the one who is more into the whole meal kit thing, but she's also the person who's much busier than I am. So it feels a little, it feels shitty at times to be like, well, you're the one who bought it, so you have to make it, when she's worked like a double, even though that's generally speaking what happens. But I feel bad about it every time,
well,
Pete, and that's important.
All right. Well, I will let you go. Happy birthday in 2 days. So great to talk to you today, as it always is. And I look forward to talking to you throughout the 6th decade.
Thanks, brother.
All right, bud.
There he goes, Christian Finnegan at Christ Finnegan on the Twitter. Wish him a happy birthday. Thank him for joining me here on the show. Go subscribe to New Music for Olds.substack.com. Go listen to The Majority Report with Sam Seder. And thank you very much for listening to me blather on here at the end of the show. And throughout the week, great week of guests. Can't do it without you. Awesome hang out last night. Had so much fun seeing so many people last night. But thanks again to all of my guests this week. If you missed any of it, go back and listen to my conversation with Kevin Richburg, scientist, farmer, edible landscaper. He was hanging out with us last night at the Hangout. Everybody loved to see him there and thanked him. Wendell Potter and Baynard Woods joined me on Tuesday. Also spoke with Aaron David Miller and Michael Cohen on Wednesday. Mara Quint joined me along with Eric Siegel on Thursday. And, of course, today's Friday. You heard this show if you're still listening to me. So go subscribe to YouTube. That's going to be the big investment. It's one of the things Sam Cedar said. You got to get into YouTube. You got to get it going. I'm going to have my intern, Odessa, who's been on spring break, and have her focus on that for the rest of the semester. And I need you to subscribe. So if you haven't, youtube.com/standupwithpete, where I will post my full interviews with guests. Start putting those up there if you want to watch them instead of just listen to them. And I hope that you'll subscribe to that. Okay, that's it. Have a great weekend. I love you guys, and talk to you on a Monday. Bye-bye.
Stand up, show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.